with us.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Do I have slides? So as Anne said, I'm Mark, and I do work with the people who made Firefox. There's two new things that we're working on right now, interestingly enough, both with Telefónica. One is Firefox OS, a phone operating system that aims to bring that open platform that Eduardo talked about to the mobile world, which we don't have yet. But the other, as Anne mentioned, is something called WebMaker, a global initiative for web literacy. And I'm not actually going to talk about any of those right now in detail, although I really want to touch on the theme of web literacy, and that's what I'm going to go into today. And I think we are exactly at that spot, not just in Europe, but I've worked enough in Europe over the last 5 years to say it's true, that we are in that spot on the game, that we are down 2-0. And I think the difference is we aren't yet confident, I'm not yet confident, that we have the most valuable players on the team yet. And I think a big part of that is because those are the young people who really in the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades will be the ones who decide whether we come ahead in that game and win or not. And so that's why I think that digital literacy, web literacy is the most important and most ignored element of this innovation and economic growth debate. So I'm going to just say at a very, very high level, although not as macroeconomic as Eduardo was, why I think that's true. And so I want to do 3 things. I want to look at our lives digitally and why these skills are so critical. I want to also look a little bit about what those skills are and then make a proposal. But first, our digital lives. This is really simple stuff. Again, not as in detail or macro as what you just saw. But in 1998, how many people here were on the internet in 1998? So like most of us, maybe 2/3, 3/4, but a tiny percentage of the planet, right? So we had 13 million internet users on the world in 1998. It's 4 years after the first web browser, Mosaic, and then Netscape comes out. You know, we're all people who started to kind of see it by then, but most of the world hadn't. So in less than 15 years, that's 2.5 billion people. So close to a third, maybe, I don't know how many people we have on this planet anymore, for 6 or 7, but, you know, we're close to a third with 2.5 billion. In our lives, how many people are on the internet now in this room? Right, everybody. Somebody put up your hand if you're the person who's not on the internet here. Right. So in our societies, we've gone to something which an elite group of people who are us, a bunch of us were online in 98, but not all of us, to basically where the internet is pervasive in all of our lives, probably everybody who drives a taxi for us, anybody who cleans a house for us, anybody who is our banker. The internet is a pervasive part of our lives. That is a dramatic social transformation, and it is the transformation we're still struggling with when we talk about this digital economy, and that is also that opportunity. But if you go from that desktop picture to this laptop in a cafe picture, which probably also is a difference in how we all use the internet over that period, by 2024, we're talking closer to 6 billion, and we're actually moving at 6 billion to the point that population is actually starting to decline on the planet again in that beginning to be in that kind of time frame. So we're looking towards increased pervasiveness, more than half of humanity, and really in any medium developed country across all class stratas that people are going to be connected. And so we're talking about a way of life, a technology, a way of organizing our businesses that really is going to be pervasive. And I think the reason I give these simple numbers is the pervasiveness of connected life is absolutely happening, will happen, has happened everywhere on the planet. And the one piece that Eduardo mentioned briefly, this is an Arduino robot, which for people who don't know, Arduino is a little kind of Lego kits you can get together to build robots and sensors and connect them to the internet. It's the kind of do-it-yourself end of the Internet of Things. So by 2024, when we have 6 billion of us on the internet, we'll have 1 trillion of those, or refrigerators, or cars, or whatever it is, on the internet. it really, truly will be a pervasively connected planet as we move into that. And it's not even really in question. The question is how. How do we want that to happen? What, is it going to be open? Is it going to be closed? Are we going to be in control of it? Or is it going to control us? And so just one last little poll before I switch gears, because I think I've made this point about pervasiveness. But if you go back, I guess I can probably go back in these slides, to 98, those of you who were on the internet in 1998, how many of you feel like at the time you roughly understood how your computer worked? You knew how to store a file, where the files were, maybe how to change a URL in a web browser. So just do a little poll. Wow, it's a kind of a moderately digital literate crowd. And then how many people in here feel like you kind of know how your computer works roughly in 2014? Is less? Oh my God, we're really going to tune my point. And how many of you really feel like you know how your smartphone works as opposed to just using it? Right, much slower. And how many people can build an Arduino robot or have built an Arduino robot? So another critical thing is, as this becomes pervasive, we are de-skilling. Even us and most of the young people who we think of as digitally skilled don't understand the underlying systems in which we are all organizing our lives. Even as simple as, where do I put my files on my laptop? So that goes to the next point, that if we're going to live in that world, whether we care about the basics of citizenship and humanity, or whether we care about economic growth and innovation and where we're going to go, we all need to know how this stuff works. Because it's like we're moving from the pre-Gutenberg era to reading and writing. We then spent hundreds of years figuring, yeah, it's actually worth everybody being able to write. That actually is like both good for citizenship and good for the economy. We're in a major shift where none of us, or very few of us except engineers, understand what's going on and what's possible and how to pull it apart and how to know when it's good or bad. And so I would say all of us really need to be looking at digital literacy. And so, nice cute picture of some kids from the internet. But, you know, whatever career you're going to go into, whether it is being a doctor, a lawyer, a banker, or maybe being an engineer, really you're going to need to understand how the digital world works at a level that lets you make good decisions, and in the context of today, see where innovation is happening. Because innovation cannot only come from tech companies when tech is deep in the guts of every single business in our economy. It has to come from people who are the experts and the entrepreneurs in all of those parts of industry and government. And so to have innovation come from everywhere, we all need to know how this digital world works, and we're doing nothing to make sure that happens. So just as a tiny, tiny window on that, and maybe a little bit more in the immediate, we did a survey, I guess about 18 months ago now in the UK with YouGov, that the broad majority of British young people want to know how to code, and almost none of them do. So there is a skills gap. And I point to that skill gap as a skills gap despite the fact that they want to learn. In that this is like easy pickings in terms of that million jobs. Now, it's a 5 to 10 year investment, although I think I have ideas, and a number of us do, on how to accelerate that. But the skills that the economy wants, young people want to learn. So there is a gap, but it isn't a gap out of interest. It's a gap of we're not delivering the skills and the education that the economy wants. And I think we need to be creatively and think outside of schools in order to do that, and I'll say that in a second. But the important thing, and I get pedantic on this, but it's because we still have not yet come to consensus on what I think is the core issue here, is that understanding how computers work and a little bit of coding, and I'll say coding is not the point, is really about understanding the structure of your digital life. It's about understanding how all this works. And so this is Ed Vaizey, who's one of the senior British ministers who's advanced the Learn to Code piece in the UK. And even though he's advocating for code, which I think is a little too narrow, he makes the most important point, that this is about understanding, controlling, shaping your own life, which means when you get to the context of innovation, it's about being able to understand enough about the digital world that you can bring that into your innovation. And last thing I would say as I switch to a little bit of how we think about these things is that Anne and a number of others have just come out with this report on Plan I for Innovation in Europe. Read it if you haven't. It says some wonderful things about how innovation will come from places that are very unexpected, not R&D labs and not even traditional kind of 1, 2, 3 innovation cycles, but very much from creative young people with tech skills. But in there, they talk about the gap that employers want these computer skills in that million jobs that are missing, but it isn't just coding. That it is problem solving, creativity, and collaboration. And that's why, as Mozilla has launched on a global campaign for web literacy, and certainly invites everybody here to join us in that campaign or start your own or whatever, we've started to talk about web literacy. Could be digital literacy, could be whatever you want, but it is really about saying at a mass level, at the level of billions of people over the next few decades, we need to promote an understanding of both the technology and the web and the culture of the web. So it's not just the technology, it's also how does this stuff work in our businesses, in our lives. And we need everybody to understand that, not just potential engineers. And we're an idealistic organization, so for us that's also about becoming a citizen of this world in the sense that you do have agency, control, freedom, and independence, which are not fait accompli at this stage. And I'll just blow by this, but this gives you a sense of what we mean by the technology and culture of the web. So it is things like participation, collaboration, privacy, identity, on top of the basic tech skills that we think people should have and we know that employers want and play long-term dividends. And so the last piece on this skill, or on this point, is what we really want to put in people's minds and what we would love to see as a part of a European agenda going forward is whether you call it web literacy, whether you call it digital literacy, this idea that we all need these skills really being as important as reading, writing, and math. That if we actually want to transform what we teach our young people to be competitive in the future, to invent the future, we need very seriously to treat web literacy as the fourth literacy. And if we don't do that, none of the other stuff we're trying to do on innovation is going to go anywhere. So, shall we have hope? I think so. I am worried that we are not investing in this, but a proposal on web literacy or digital literacy, or call it what you want. The thing that's interesting to me, this looks like a depressing picture, but it actually depends on whether you think of this as a school from 100 years ago or now. And there are schools that look like this now, which is depressing. But what's exciting about this school 100 years ago, 125 years ago, is we decided as Western nations, and I'm Canadian, I don't know if I said that, but we decided as Western nations that we needed to invest in universal access to education towards the end of the 19th century because we needed to move ourselves from an agrarian to an industrial economy. This is a very clear, specific choice. And what we did was we invented a mechanism which was the public school, or we grew a mechanism which was the public school in order to do that. And so we've actually been tremendously effective, right? I mean, how many people here didn't go to primary school? How many people went to a rural one-room school? Right? How many people went to a public school in a city? And so, sounds silly, right? It's so ubiquitous now, but we invented that institution to move from one economic era to another. But that is not, in its current form, the institution that is going to help us make the change we're talking about now. And in our businesses, and even in talking about open government and data and how government works, we admit and are partway through a transformation that understands that this is as big as the switch from agrarian to industrial society, to move into the digital society. But we've done nothing, or very little, to either change how we think about education or to teach digital literacy, which is the core new set of skills needed for this next era of our economy. And so, a couple of things I think we can be doing that are very practically. One is changing how we teach in schools. Absolutely important. It's not that we don't need schools, but having schools that feel like they were designed to get people into factory jobs, not helpful. Still a lot of that. And it isn't just about putting computers in schools. It is about shifting from theoretical and kind of time schedule-oriented things which were designed for getting people acclimatized for factory work or office jobs, to things that are about creativity and making and hands-on, the making things do stuff piece. So in schools, yes, skills of the digital era like design, like coding, and in a hands-on way. But also, and this is one of our webmaker people in India, like there is a huge untapped, font of value in parents, techies, other people who, when you call them to action to say, we want to teach digital literacy to the world, they'll come. And so, as Anne said, just last summer, we did this Maker Party event. 1,600 people stepped up around the world in 300 cities and said, yes, we want to come help teach these skills to people who want them. And so this is just a workshop that popped up in India from some Mozilla volunteers. But we don't need to wait around and just change our schools. There are millions of people in our society who call to action will help us move this agenda forward. And of course, then there are companies who are committed to working on this stuff. We work very closely with Telefonica's Think Big program around building up digital literacy curriculum, helping young people understand entrepreneurship, and so on. And so, like in Eduardo's slide, looking at all those initiatives, moving the bar on web literacy is something that all of us can play a role on. And I'll skip that one for a second. We can all play a role on, and what we need to just do together is agree to push digital literacy at a massive scale. And, maybe it sounds like I'm saying something obvious, but when we look at education conversations as you set the next 4 years of the EU agenda, this is nowhere at the level of importance it needs to be in the education discussions. And when you look at innovation discussions, the idea that we need to move skills is always a sideline and an afterthought. But this is the thing, digital literacy for all people who will be in all walks of life at a level which is not shallow, that is about deep creative skills, the kind of skills our workforce needs, has to be pushed at a massive scale. And so, we've started to try to do that in a tiny way with these maker parties that I mentioned. It's actually almost 1,700 events last year. We're going to do that again this year. It's a big tent campaign, lots of organizations inside of it. The UK has Code Hour. There was an Hour of Code in the US. There are different campaigns. What I think we need is still something much more ambitious. And I'll kind of leave you with this silly picture and a thought of what that ambition could look like and why it can succeed. Which is, I'm Canadian, as I said. This was a very corny campaign that started in the 70s called Participaction. What do you think that Participaction is asking you to do? Exercise. And so why I give this, it may seem like a silly example. They had horrible TV ads and everything, but it was the seed in the 70s of many countries here that you all come from probably had similar public education campaigns around exercise and fitness started in the 70s, the global wave or a wave across the West. But what that grew into was a grand coalition of people pushing in that direction that has led, not just this campaign, but has led to a recognition that fitness and health and exercise is something that's desirable, even often amongst people who are not fit, but then has led to policy interventions around nutrition labeling, has led to huge industrial growth around health food products, fitness clothing, has led to huge things in the internet era and fitness tracking and all of these kind of things, really is that social push for we need to move a wave, and certainly led to many health programs in schools, that led to a wave that said we need to use all aspects of our society, doing things in school, making money with new products, regulating a product environment to shape how that works in order to push this agenda. And I think digital literacy as a fuel for innovation needs that same thing. Needs us to invest in curriculum, needs us to invest in policy guidelines, needs to invest in products that will actually move this agenda so we have a generation of empowered young people, or hopefully the next 5 generations of empowered young people who can invent the future and invent massive economic growth, which is really sitting under the surface to be unleashed with the technology and culture that the web has brought us. So I am actually quite hopeful, but I think we need to talk about the right things on digital skills in order to unleash the kind of growth that we want. So hopefully that's food for thought. With that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mark. It was an excellent presentation, and you said something that I very much like. The skills that the economy needs, children want to learn. That's very profound. And it is particularly important here in Europe because there's so much talk about a lost generation. We have unbelievably high unemployment rates among young people. So this is an unbelievable opportunity for us, to fill the jobs. I spoke about 1 million unfilled vacancies. We could train these young people to take over these jobs. So, and thereby make sure that a lost generation is not a lost generation. Because as I always say, if this really is a lost generation, we are all lost because they are the future. So, Mark, but not to be too pessimistic, because there are countries in Europe who actually do quite well. So there's, I wanted to mention a country that really is an absolute overachiever when it comes to digital technologies and skills, and that is, of course, tiny Estonia. That is why we have asked Erki Urva, chairman of the management board of the Estonian Information Technology Foundation for Education, to respond to your presentation and explain why digital literacy is so important and what a country like Estonia, which may be tiny, but really is leading the way in Europe in this area, what you are doing about it. What can we learn from you? Erki, your reflections, just for a few minutes, please.